If you've watched the first 3 episodes of Ice Queendom, you probably have a pretty good idea as to where the plot is headed, at least for the next couple episodes. At the end of episode 3, Weiss was finally attacked by the Nightmare. It made its move, and so we are going to be headed to the world of Weiss's Nightmare, created by her insecurities. And this is where we are going to see the alternate designs of all of Team RWBY and Team Juniper that we saw in the promotional material. And because this is a world of Weiss's insecurities, these designs have a lot of significance for how Weiss views herself as well as the rest of her classmates. But I'm going to discuss that in a separate video, so, make sure to subscribe and look out for that. But in this video, I want to more talk about how the plot is going to go with entering Weiss's dream and how they are going to get Weiss out of the dream throughout the story of Ice Queendom as a whole. Because right now, and from what we've seen in the first 3 episodes of Ice Queendom, things are a little bit different from the first volume of RWBY. Namely, Weiss is really not that close to any of her classmates. Right before she fell victim to the Nightmare, she was actually crying about not being team leader, not being on Pyrrha's team, and also that she's on the same team with a Faunus. So, in Ice Queendom at least, that entire conversation between Blake and Weiss, where Weiss said that it doesn't matter that she was once part of the White Fang, that doesn't ring as true. That might be something that Weiss wants to be able to forgive Blake for, but those insecurities are still very much present and are something that is going to keep her distant, at least her heart distant at this point in time, from being able to connect to the rest of her teammates. Shion specifically said that the heart of the victim could reject strangers, so it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of Team RWBY is able to enter Weiss's dream. But the fact remains, they are certainly going to be able to enter Weiss's dream. If we see the character designations of each of these alternate designs, we have Weiss's Nightmare side. That is where we see the Esdeath form of Weiss, the very military-esque, cold and stern ice queen that she is. And the rest of Team RWBY, with RWBY, Yang, and Blake, each of them are their lucid dream designs, meaning that they are the ones that are going to enter Weiss's dream world. And then the rest of them, all of Team Juniper, are the dream actor versions. They are the versions that Weiss's Nightmare is going to create of Team Juniper. Team Juniper themselves are not actually going to enter into Weiss's Nightmare. But something is going to be very different about Weiss's Nightmare compared to the nightmare that we saw of Jean. Jean's was very small, as I mentioned in the video that I went over about the nightmare itself, and this was likely because the nightmare that was attacking Jean was still essentially an adolescent. Shion mentioned that the nightmares attack a person, feed off their aura, and grow. And the one that had attacked Jean was not able to grow. So it was still kind of a baby nightmare, or a more adolescent one, not as powerful. So Jean's nightmare was more self-contained, and so his friends, the rest of Team Juniper, were able to enter his dream and were able to rescue him fairly easily. This will not be the case when it comes to Weiss's Nightmare. The Nightmare has been feeding off of her aura for much longer. Weeks, if not months at this point, depending on the exact timeline of the events of Volume 1. Jean's Nightmare attacked him like a day or 2 after the beacon initiation because of his underdeveloped aura. It could only feed so much and thus subjected him to the nightmare, but Weiss, it's already after the end of Volume 1, which, with everything that happened, some stuff was cut from Ice Queendom, but the entire plot of Jaundice, as well as some other things here and there, the Vital Festival had already started being prepared, so, it's gotta be at least a month into the first term of Beacon Academy, if not 2 already, and this nightmare is quite possibly going to be a nearly fully grown nightmare, if not already complete, and Weiss's Nightmare is not going to be some small, self-contained bubble that will be easy for her friends to burst. In this case, it is going to be an entire dream world that Team RWBY will have to enter. The nightmare at this point is likely going to be powerful enough to completely take over Weiss and use Weiss's dream as a way to feed off of anyone else that would come to save her, in this case, Team RWBY. As we've seen with the designation of Weiss's alternate form, the Nightmare side, that really implies that the Nightmare is going to alter Weiss's personality, and the specific ways that it will alter her personality are going to be directly tied to her insecurities. Again, that's something I'm going to touch on in a different video. But with this entire world being created from Weiss's insecurities, it is going to also incorporate all of the people that she knows up until that point in time. That's why we are going to see the dream actor versions of Team Juniper, and initially there are going to be the dream actor versions of RWBY, Yang, and Blake, the versions of each of them that were born from Weiss's Nightmare. And so, when Team RWBY does try to enter Weiss's Nightmare, it is going to be very different from when Team Juniper entered Jean's Nightmare. Because when Pyrrha, Nora, and Ren entered Jean's Nightmare, they were able to enter the Nightmare as just themselves. The same outfits, the same personalities, the same everything. They were able to just jump into his Nightmare and be able to save him. That's not going to be the case with Weiss. In Weiss's case, with the Nightmare having such a strong hold on Weiss, and with Weiss's misgivings about her teammates in general, RWBY, Yang, and Blake are not going to be able to just directly enter Weiss's dream. As Xion said, Weiss's heart would reject them at that point if they tried to just force themselves into this dream world. They would be characters that would not fit with the world created from Weiss's mind. And we might see something like that in the next episode, actually. When Weiss is sent into the coma because of the Nightmare, Team RWBY might try to enter and just try to force their way in as their regular selves, and we'll see them get rejected. They'll have to try again, except this time they will have to fit into Weiss's Nightmare into the versions of themselves created by the Nightmare. That is why we will see these alternate designs. They will have to fit into this new world wherever they may be, and because of that, they might actually be separated initially, have to find each other, and then locate Weiss to be able to break her out of it, to break the Nightmare's control of her. There is so much that can be explored with this plotline, not to mention the amazing visuals that we saw when Weiss was afflicted by the Nightmare, when the Nightmare made its move at the end of episode 3. Just the visuals are absolutely stunning, and I cannot wait to see how this is going to turn out in the next 9 episodes of Ice Queendom. I don't know if all of those 9 episodes are going to be completely around Weiss's Nightmare. I imagine a number of them are going to be, but I feel like there's still going to be a few more twists and turns as the story progresses forward. Maybe more alternate designs that we will see as perhaps RWBY, Blake, and Yang will give into their own insecurities at some point while they are trying to save Weiss. If the Nightmare has grown strong enough and has been able to multiply within Weiss's Nightmare, then those Grimm might attack RWBY, Blake, and Yang as well, and we'll see their inner worlds and how they view each of their own insecurities, as well as the rest of their friends and teammates on top of that. There is so much that can be explored with this, but when it ultimately comes to entering Weiss's Nightmare, it's going to be very difficult. And it's going to be interesting to see how the plot itself will handle it. When it comes to actually rescuing her, I think there will be a battle that comes about between RWBY, Blake, and Yang and Weiss's Nightmare side, that they will have to find some way to defeat her and be able to break the Nightmare's hold. It'll also likely incorporate Weiss overcoming her insecurities, realizing that she can rely on RWBY as a leader, that she does have friends, and that she doesn't have to be this cold-hearted, stoic version of herself. And considering that this alternate version of Weiss does seem to be a little bit older, perhaps she will already have unlocked her summoning at this point, at least in the Nightmare, because this is an ideal version of herself. Knowing that her sister, Winter, is capable of summoning, then Weiss might already have her summons at this point, and we might get to see some new summons based on what Weiss has seen of summoning in the past. There is so much potential for this, and once Weiss is broken out of the Nightmare, if this Nightmare does escape, similar to how Jean's Nightmare escaped from him after Team Juniper was able to defeat it, that's gonna cause some problems in the real world, because having a fully grown Nightmare, or very close to nearly fully grown Nightmare, as well as if it was able to multiply, that's going to cause a lot of problems on Beacon Campus in general if Xion isn't able to capture the Grimm right away. If there's multiple of them, that's going to be a little bit more difficult to do, especially if it is such a looming size as well. That is going to be a much harder fought battle. And there might be some other plot points that come into play at that point in time as well, but, you know, we'll have to wait and see more episodes of Ice Queendom for those theories to fully take shape, and I'll certainly be making videos on those in the future. So, with all that being said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How you think the plot of Ice Queendom is going to unfold. How Team RWBY is going to be able to enter Weiss's Nightmare. Does the scenario that I suggested make sense? That RWBY, Blake, and Yang will not be able to directly enter Weiss's Nightmare. That instead they will have to fit into the alternate versions of themselves that was created from Weiss's unconsciousness, and then have to work their way to find possibly each other, but also Weiss on top of that, to eventually break the nightmare's hold? Or do you have some other ideas for how Weiss's Nightmare is going to work, and how things are going to progress in the plot of Ice Queendom as a whole? I really look forward to hearing your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, want to see more like it, more Ice Queendom theories and coverage of Ice Queendom and RWBY as a whole, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.